Hate is a strong word. It's a phrase we've all heard time and time again, and despite being my favorite game of all time, there's still plenty of things in TF2 that I hate, and no more apparent is this hatred than in the game's weapon pool. Now don't get me wrong, TF2 has a masterful variety of weapons for each class, with several brilliantly designed weapons and certain unlocks that make my dopamine levels shoot through the roof. But whether it be from a lack of experience with an unlock, disdain with the weapon's mechanics, or even a single stat ruining the entire weapon's functionality for me, there's still a handful of weapons in the game that I just downright hate. So, after downsizing this list to one weapon per class, I've come to the definitive selection of items in TF2 that I hate using. Now, before I get into this list, I want to make a couple of things clear. First and foremost, and probably the most obvious point, these are my opinions. I don't expect anyone to blindly agree with my entire list, and yours probably looks a lot different. So if you feel like disliking the video and leaving a comment saying how wrong I am, don't worry, that's totally fine. Secondly, this isn't like absolute disdain towards these weapons. In fact, there are situations where some of them are actually useful and considered the best choices for their respective classes. I mean, hell, I'll still sometimes use some of these weapons myself. They're just selections that at best, I find the least enjoyable, or at worst, don't bother picking up 9 times out of 10. Okay, now with all of that out of the way, let's get into the weapons in TF2 that I hate. Kicking off this list, we have Scout, and the weapon I chose for him is one of his most iconic unlocks, but honestly one I've never really found much enjoyment with, the Force of Nature. It sucks because there's so many things I love about this weapon. The look of the gun, the sound design, and the insane close range DPS on this thing are all so great. And then you get to the weapon's knockback mechanic and it all just falls apart for me.
I cannot believe this.
I get that the knockback can be useful for the additional mobility it gives you, but more often than not, I find that all it does is screw me over. The knockback can either push your target too far away, blasting them out of your effective range and making them aware of your presence, or knock you away if you're airborne while fighting someone, shooting you in a predictable trajectory away from your target. And for a gun so devastating at close range, the last thing I want is for the enemy to be launched a mile away so that my next shot can do next to nothing. All these hiccups lead me to typically use the stock scattergun most of the time, and if anything, I'd recommend using the soda popper instead, which to be completely honest, seems to do the Force of Nature's job in a less clunky way. Like I said earlier, the added mobility it gives you can be useful, but for someone like me who focuses more on shooting over movement, I feel like the knockback screws me over more than actually being useful, making it the kickoff selection for today's list. Up next is Soldier, and many of the complaints about the Force of Nature also apply to the weapon I chose for him, being the Beggar's Bazooka. I mean, both weapons have insane burst damage potential and provide unique movement abilities, only to fall short because of a single stat that makes them feel unreliable. And in the case of the Beggar's Bazooka, it's the projectile deviation that completely kills the weapon for me. Now, I understand why the weapon needs a stat like that, because being able to vomit out 3 rockets that travel in a perfectly straight line would be absolutely broken. In fact, on the rare occasion I do use this weapon, it's mainly on maps with tons of choke points and closed off areas, so this downside doesn't affect me all that often since my rockets still end up hitting something in all those tight spaces. And then something like this happens and I just want to throw the whole weapon away. Yeah, good luck hitting anything even slightly far away from you, because now your effectiveness is at the mercy of RNG. See, no matter how cool and flashy mid-air jumps can be, or how useful rounding the corner with 3 rapid-firing rockets are, they ultimately mean nothing to me the majority of the time when the rockets don't go where I want or expect them to. Again, I get why the projectile deviation stat exists, and the weapon itself is a fine enough rocket launcher to use, but no number of fun and interesting stats could make this weapon worth using to me most of the time when it puts you in situations like this. Alright, moving on to Pyro, we have a weapon of theirs that's on this list not because of a feature it has, like the previous 2 entries, but rather because of one it doesn't have. Debuting its dishonorable mention on this list is the Phlogistinator for one reason and one reason only. It can't air blast. I know people typically hate the Phlog for several other more pressing reasons, like it being too effective when paired with the Scorch Shot or being nearly unstoppable when combined with the stock Uber. But to me though, that lack of an air blast is the single deal breaker for using this thing, because I rarely get any enjoyment out of using the Phlog, and all I end up thinking is, man, I really wish I had an air blast right about now. Like, air blasting does so many things that can benefit the team, reflecting projectiles, extinguishing teammates, pushing away spies going in for an important pick, stopping Ubers. They're all so impactful one way or another. So do you think I'd want to pick the single flamethrower in the game that doesn't let you do any of that? Yeah, no. To me, the flog is a constant reminder that I could be doing so much more for the team and helping them in a number of scenarios that could potentially happen if I just used any other primary. Now for Demo's choice on our hate-filled list, I've decided to use a clip from my previous video about weapons I love and have to use to segue into his weapon on today's list. Now, I think we can all agree that the sticky bomb launcher is one of the most powerful weapons in the game. It's got everything you'd want in a weapon: deadly explosives, a sizable clip count, and high burst damage. Yet despite all of that, I've always preferred its less popular cousin, the quickie bomb launcher. And I hate stock because it's not the quickie bomb launcher. Yes, the stock sticky bomb launcher is absolutely one of the strongest weapons in the game and arguably the most popular choice among Demo's damaging secondaries, but I've always had a strong preference for the quickie bomb launcher, and even though it's technically a side grade, its fancy bells and whistles completely outshine the features and effectiveness of stock to me. Like ever since I started utilizing the weapon's faster arming stickies and superior sticky sniping capabilities in pretty much any match I used the thing, any and all hope for ever using stock went right down the drain. Now, whenever I do decide to use the sticky bomb launcher, it feels too sluggish, too harshly limited by range, and unfortunately, turns a secondary, essential for many demo players, into something that I hate even picking up nowadays. The only thing that stock does better is having dedicated skins and use with war paints, but believe me, if the quickie bomb launcher ever had those same variants, my god, you'd never see me use stock ever. Okay, time for a weapon on this list that I've probably used half a dozen times in my entire life and really never want to use again. You know it in all its mediocrity, it's the buffalo steak sandwich. As a heavy main, I can honestly say that I try to strike a balance between using all of his unlocks, even though I tend to stick to the stock minigun, Delocus bar, and Gru. That is, all of his unlocks except the buffalo steak. This thing is seriously one of my least favorite items added to this game ever. What sucks is that every part of this unlock seems really interesting on paper, and then you realize that after being forced to take extra damage while being locked to your melee slot, the buffalo steak just blows. And being stuck using only your melee has to be my least favorite part of the weapon. It's such a counterproductive feature, making the tankiest class, with the largest hitbox mind you, into a paperweight that has no means of fighting anything outside of melee range. Plus, Heavy's most deadly range is melee range, so why trade that unmatchable firepower from your minigun for a boxing match that you're so ill-equipped to actually win? It absolutely sucks that the one item for Heavy that facilitates an interesting playstyle switch-up makes that new playstyle horrifically ineffective and one of the most unfun ways to play Heavy in the entire game, at least for me. So, now that we've come to Engineer, you can probably already guess what weapon of his I hate. Better yet, I'll let you leave it up to a coin toss. It's either the Wrangler or the Short Circuit. You placed your bets? Ready for the answer? Alright, it's the Short Circuit. Okay, that probably wasn't very difficult to guess, but the reason it's on today's list is because of one basic truth. It's just not fun to play against, no matter how useful it can be. Even with this unfun reputation, the Short Circuit does have the unique status as being a necessary evil at times, because for every hellhole of spam from engineers playing payload offense, there's your team's saving grace of engineers deleting Crockett's so you can leave Blue's spawn room on Dust Bowl. But outside of use cases that benefit the whole team, they don't excuse the other 99% of times players use the thing, where picking Soldier or Demo means all of your methods of ranged damage are completely gone. I really do just hate the Short Circuit for being unfun in general, since anytime I see its potential to benefit my team, I can equally see it ruining my day if an enemy engineer has it equipped, and I think that's an outcome nobody wants, not just myself. Alright, it's time to talk about Medic, and fair warning, this is probably going to be the most controversial take in this whole video, because what I'm about to say might put me on every single Medic main's shit list. Okay, here we go. I hate using the Crusader's crossbow. To be fair, I agree that the crossbow really is a medic's best friend. It lets you heal teammates for insane amounts at close and long range, deals hefty chunks of damage from afar, reloads while inactive, and so on. Basically, it feels like the perfect weapon that could do everything, and yet it's my least favorite option to have equipped in his primary slot. Okay, well, second least favorite. I don't know why. Maybe it's from the slight societal pressure in TF2 for medic players to use his best primary by default, or maybe I'm just burnt out from using it for so many years, but for whatever reason, I really don't find it all that enjoyable to use these days. Now, would I use the crossbow if my team asked me to? Yeah, sure. But would I choose it out of my own volition? Honestly, no. Besides the two aforementioned possible reasons for me not really liking the crossbow anymore, I can guarantee one surefire reason I've grown to dislike it recently, and it's all through another primary that I found surprisingly way more fun, the overdose. This thing is absolutely my new favorite tool for medic, giving you a free speed boost to use at any point, all by doing his main job, healing and building uber. And the speed boost is also pretty fun and useful for things like traversing the map quicker, reaching your team faster if you're being chased or out of position, and even outrunning spies trying to go for an important pick like you. But the final nail in the coffin for preferring the overdose more than the crossbow comes in the form of close-range self-defense. I've heard the argument so many times that if you're good enough at keeping your teammates alive through proper healing and well-aimed crossbow shots, you'll never have to worry about defending yourself, since they'll stay alive to do it for you, when in reality, sometimes your teammates will still die no matter how much you burst heal them. And in those cases, I feel much more confident defending myself with a high-round syringe gun with surprisingly consistent damage that can also help you move faster to safety over a crossbow with a single high damaging bolt. Plus, I'll still utilize the overdose even outside of movement or last resort scenarios. I enjoy playing as a more active and aggressive medic, so if an enemy is shooting my healing target and they just don't seem to notice, you can bet I'm pelting their face full of syringes. Now, I won't pretend like the overdose is outright better than the Crusader's crossbow, because it's not. Most of the time, those bolts are invaluable for getting your healing target's health back up and warding off enemies with powerful medium to long range shots. But the overdose is better for me. My higher confidence in having a syringe gun to defend myself, plus the speed boost it gives, easily dethrones the crossbow as my best friend when playing medic, and I honestly don't see that changing for a while. And again, unless my team specifically asks me to use the crossbow, it's the single weapon of his you'll see me using the absolute least. Okay, that was a lot. So for this next section, we're gonna take a break and talk about the classic. And it's my most hated weapon for sniper for one simple reason. I absolutely hate the way it feels to fire the thing. Because sniper is so heavily reliant on accuracy, getting the rhythm down to click on a head as soon as it appears on your crosshair is vital, which after a while is a skill that you can pretty easily develop. You know what skill I think doesn't feel easy to develop? Letting go of mouse 1 to shoot your gun. Oh, it feels so weird! Yeah, having a full view of the screen while charging your shot can be nice for countering tunnel vision, but having to release your mouse to fire instead of clicking it just feels so wrong to me. Even the Huntsman, which shares this unique method of firing, is easier for me to use, not just because of its ridiculous headshot detection, but due to the arrow being a projectile, meaning you have to predict the movement of your enemy to land a hit. And since I'm so used to landing shots with the Huntsman, using something hit scan with the same firing mechanics somehow feels harder, and ultimately leads me to never really touching the classic at all. I will say, I love everything else about the weapon. It looks really cool, and I love its sound design, but that firing method to shoot the classic is such a deal breaker. Honestly, I probably just need to get better with using the thing, but as it stands, I hate how the classic feels to use overall. Finally, we've come to Spy to end off today's list, and even though he's a class I don't play all that often, there's one item of his that I refuse to touch on the rare occasion I pick him, and that dishonorable selection goes to the Cloak and Dagger. This is a watch that I used to love, because when I first started playing the game, I wasn't good with cloak management at all, but with this thing, I could sit in a corner and strike when the time was right, and it's still pretty useful for that even today, being able to wait for the right moment to make a crucial pick and escape back to safety, all without the worry of being found before your cloak meter depletes. Yet that's my problem with the thing, because I find doing that to be so boring. To me, the playstyle the Cloak and Dagger forces you into is so mind-numbing, and I'd much rather use stock and have to make a play before my cloak is gone. Plus, eventually being forced out of your cloak and getting as many kills as you can before you potentially die sure as hell beats this. Now, I get that there are situations where you'd want to wait for an important pick to come along and move in when the moment's right, but that waiting part only makes me feel like I'm in spectator mode and not even playing the game at that point. I need action when I play Spy. I need the rush of constantly going in for kills, wondering if I'll make it out alive. What I don't need is waiting for my best years to pass me by while I'm slowly making my way to the nearest back. And there we have it, folks, the weapons in TF2 that I hate using. Now, even though I might have ruffled some feathers here and there, that really wasn't my intention. All I wanted was to showcase the weapon taste of an average Joe Schmo like myself, even if some of my takes might be hot dog water to the majority of you watching. But I really am curious to know what you guys think. Some of you might agree with a lot of these choices, and others probably wouldn't touch my list with a 10-foot pole. So feel free to leave a comment sharing what weapons in TF2 you personally hate using, or let me know what you thought of my choices. Anyway, that's all I've got for today, so thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.